Awesome. How's everybody today? I asked somebody, yeah, that's great. I asked somebody the other day, how are you? And they said, I'm FIFA fantastic, because of the World Cup going on. We should probably start something here in Clemson, like, how are you? I'm Tiger Terrific or something like that, right? But FIFA fantastic, and that's because of the World Cup and all that's going on. But I tell you what, they're talking about more than any other thing at the World Cup, and that is the ranking of the players. And the whole discussion is about whether Messi, Lionel Messi, or Ronaldo, or Neymar is the best player in the world. And there's so much intrigue about that. Well, I have to say that Neymar is the only one left in the competition now. The other two are out, sadly, but that's the way it is, And so I know a lot about soccer. I love soccer. I just about watch every game. And I know a lot about, I have an opinion about who's the best player in the world. When it comes to superheroes, I have no opinion at all. I have no clue who the best superhero might be. But, if I asked my girls, my daughters, they would probably say Thor. I've heard them talk about Thor, and they so badly want to watch Thor, right? And of course, the reason is just simply because of the way he looks, right? He's just the most amazing hunk of an individual. By the same token, some of you might think it's Wonder Woman, right? It's just beautiful and all that sort of stuff. But truly, if we analyzed it a little more seriously, we'd probably come up with something like Batman or Superman or the greatest superheroes of all time. Well, of course, I went to the ultimate authority in all things, Google, and I said, okay, tell me about the ranking of the superheroes. And they came up with this list, right? Number one, Batman, Spider-Man. Yeah, Wonder Woman made it, but no Thor, no Superman anywhere on the top 10 list. Can you believe that, right? And so that was one opinion. That was a horrible website, one of those we have to press next to go to the next one and so on. I managed to get all the way through just so I could present this list. But anyway, I looked at another one which was based on the popularity of the movies, right? And so they came up with this list, and guess what? It was at the top again, right? Batman, The Dark Knight, The Avengers, Captain America, he made it in there twice. Superman made it into the top 10 eventually, Superman 2. And Thor just didn't make it. I'm sorry, girls. Thor didn't make it. But, who cares? Why do we worry about this stuff? The reason we worry about this stuff is because ranking is a big deal to us. We absolutely rank everything in our lives. Everything in the world is ranked, and it affects us as people. We rank everything. We rank restaurants, the top 10, and the upstate. We rank hotels, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. We rank frequent flyers. We rank universities. You go to U.S. News, you'll find out where Clemson exists on the ranking in the world. And all those things. We rank all those things, and we even have shows that rank people because we just have to know, who's got the best voice in the world, who's the best singer, who's got the best talent act in the world, who's the best survivor, and who's the best bachelor and who's the best bachelorette. I can't think of a dumber show. It's like, who's going to make the dumbest decision in the world to marry somebody on screen? And perhaps it's how to get an STD on screen or something like that. But anyway, we come up with these things. The best one for me, by the way, that's not so out of kilter, right? If you go out there, just right out that door, and you'll read a sign on the notice out there that says one out of two every sexually active people will get an STD by the age of 25. 1 out of 2. All right, so maybe that's what they're doing when they do Bachelorette. But we like to rank everything. The best one for me is the best baker. Right? This is a cult following, right? I know church groups, maybe not around here, but there are church groups who meet together to watch the best British baker. Absolutely. And I absolutely have no idea how we survived without knowing who can make the best cupcake in the world. It's just unbelievable to me. But anyway, we do it. We love to categorize people, to rank them. We rank ourselves. We do SAT scores and ACT, and that ranks us, and that sends us off to a particular college, particular university. And, we just rank everything. We rank athletics. We rank, I was sitting with a friend of mine whose potential son-in-law was ranked in the where they choose baseball players. What do you call that? The selection time when you choose baseball players. And and drafting, right, the draft pick. And I said, what is he ranked? He said he was ranked 151. Well, that was actually pretty good, right? It was pretty good because it was like thousands who were ranked. And he did get chosen 151st, and he got like a $450,000 signing bonus, even though he's ranked 151. But we rank people, and it's important to us because it gives us privilege. Right? Your rank gives you privilege. You go up in society, you go up in culture, you go up in the corporate world, you go up in the military, you go up in the university, you go up in the sports world. It brings you privilege. It can bring you a big payout. It gives you all kinds of power. You know, it's very, very important to us in our culture to gain those things, and that's what we try to achieve. So it affects our drive and ambition. In fact, most of our drive and ambition in life is just to get better, to get up to the next rank, to get to that rank that we want to get to, and perhaps become the greatest at what we do. That's just intrinsic in our DNA, it seems, and it affects our self-esteem too, because we rank ourselves and we see ourselves and we give ourselves self-value based upon how we view ourselves in the world according to how we're ranked and as we compare to other people. It also influences who we hang with, right? Because we don't like to hang with people who are lower ranked than us. You know, we talk about peers. Peers are basically everybody in the same rank as you. All right? We hang around with our peers, or we hang around with people who are ranked higher than us. We like that because they're cooler than we are, right? We like to hang with those people. We're not so great at hanging with the people who are lower ranked than we are. And so it affects us. It affects us every day. It affects our outlook in life. It affects our view of ourselves. It affects who we go to find important things from or wisdom from, because we just about always will find somebody who's ranked higher than we are in order to find out knowledge or information or wisdom about life in that particular area. And so ranking is actually huge. It's big. We rank everything. It's important to us. It affects our psyche, our souls, our brains, our minds. It affects everything about us. And so aren't you glad that Jesus actually addressed ranking? That was very important to him. Hugely important to him, and it was hugely important to the disciples. And we're going to look at a conversation that he had with the disciples today, and he's going to tell us how he views ranking in our culture. The context is that Jesus is in his ministry here on the earth, and he's getting a following. Right? He started with just 3 or 4, and then got to 12 followers, then he had 70, and by this time there were thousands. Right? We saw last week how he fed the 5,000. It was 5,000 men, women, and adults, about 10,000 people. You know, and these people were now following him all over the world and all over the countryside, and that's what happened in those days. Rabbis had a following, and they created these organizations, these companies around a particular rabbi, and so Jesus now had like an organization. This was the Jesus organization, and he had his disciples and all these people, and the disciples started to wonder how we are ranked in this. Is there an inner 3? Is there a special 12? You know, how does this work in the model of Jesus Christ and in his organization? So in Mark chapter 9, Jesus is actually going on a journey with his disciples down to Capernaum, and the disciples would be lagging back. There's 12 of them, and he's at the front or whatever. And they're having a very heated conversation back there. And of course, being God and fully man, fully God and fully man, he understood what they were talking about, even though he may not have heard them. But he knew exactly what they were talking about. And like Jesus does always, he addresses what it is if it's important. And so he's going to address this because the disciples were talking about ranking. Who is the greatest? And so they get to the destination, and Jesus calls them aside because this is hugely important. It's hugely important for the disciples. It's hugely important for us. And what Jesus says is absolutely shocking. This is how to engage in the culture of Jesus Christ and with God in his world. And they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about in the road?" As if he didn't know. But they kept quiet because they might have been a little embarrassed, because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. They were talking about ranking and how does ranking work in the organization of Jesus Christ. And they wanted to know, not just because they were narcissistic and self-centered, because it affected them every single day of their life. Ranking was hugely important. It created very awkward situations when they didn't know their ranking, because every single day when they sat down for dinner in that culture, you sat at the table according to your rank. And so there was the head honcho, who in this case, of course, was Jesus. And then, the next most important sat on the left, one sat on the right, and then everybody sat according to their rank around the table. And so they felt awkwardness all the time with Jesus Christ because they didn't know where to sit when it came to the table. They had no clue because he hadn't told them by this stage at all where he ranked the disciples. But it was important to them. It wasn't important to them for that, but also this organization was growing. Don't you hate it when an organization doesn't really know who their leaders are? I mean, my daughter told me yesterday they went somewhere and it was terrible because nobody knew. Nobody was leading. Nobody was taking them anywhere. It were just mulled around, and she was felt very awkward in that situation. And you do. You feel awkward in situations where you don't know who is ranked and who the leaders are and who you should follow. And so this was happening in this whole organization, this crowd that was following Jesus. And so the disciples wanted to get to this. But they were also even more concerned about the future kingdom because they knew Jesus was the Messiah by this time because he had awesome power. He had shown that he had power over everything, even death. The elements, the weather, everything, he had shown that he had that power. So they were absolutely convinced, the disciples were, that he was going to be the Messiah. The Messiah to them was somebody who was going to set up a real kingdom right there in Jerusalem, and he was going to free them from the rule of the Gentiles, the Roman government who was actually oppressing and ruling over the Israelites. And they were praying and praying and praying for hundreds of years for the Messiah to come, and he was going to be a real political leader, and he was going to set up a kingdom, and he was going to be the king, and he was going to have his head honchos around him, and they were in charge of different things. And so they were concerned about the kingdom. They had the timing wrong. Jesus wasn't going to set up his earthly kingdom then. He's still going to do that in the coming day, but he wasn't going to do it then. He had to pave the way for that in a different way, which we'll see in a minute. But the disciples, they were all about this kingdom, and they were very concerned about who was going to be the, sit on the left and sit on the right, as you know from another conversation about James and John. And so this was huge to them. They wanted to know. So there was a sense of relief, actually, when Jesus came to address this whole idea of ranking in their organization and their culture. How does Jesus view this? And this is what he said. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, if anyone wants to be first, like if anyone's concerned about rank, he must be the very last. And not only that, the servant. That was like a cuss word. That word doesn't exist in this conversation, Jesus. You cannot mention the word servant. We are talking about rank. And a servant has no rank. The servant in that culture has absolutely no rank. He has no place at the table. He does not sit at the table, Jesus. Don't you understand that servant and this conversation about ranking just do not intertwine at all? But Jesus says, no. In my culture, in the culture of Jesus Christ, in my following, the servant is the top rank. He says the servant actually has no rank. He has no place around the table. All the servant does is meet the needs of other people and serve and execute their agendas. That's what he does. He goes about his life just trying to meet other people's needs. He cannot, go about serving his own needs. He is there for other people. This was absolutely shocking. This was so counterculture. And it is to us too, if we really think about it and really go into our hearts. That the most important people to Jesus are those who are just servants. Not concerned about rank, not concerned about a place at the table, totally concerned about meeting other people's needs and serving their agendas. And so just in case the disciples didn't get it, and just in case we didn't get it, which we don't, and the disciples didn't, he provides a great illustration. The master teacher Jesus always has some incredible illustration. So right there, he gets an illustration. This is what he does. And in verse 36, he took up a little child, whom he placed among them. And taking the child in his arms, he said to them, whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. This is huge. This is how to engage with God. This is all about, not a little bit, not a side story. This is all about how we engage with God in the culture of Jesus Christ and in his following. It's about welcoming little children. Now, why did he use little children in the same context of being the servant of all? Well, children were even lower than servants. In that culture, they did not honor and appreciate their children. Children were dispensable. They weren't like us, posting them on Facebook, look at my little kid, everybody look how beautiful they are. They did not value their children. If you were not the firstborn male, you were nothing. You were dispensable. The father many times put that child to death if there was any deformity at all, if they didn't like them, if they were useless, if they weren't, above average or whatever, they just put them to death, or they sold them off to slavery. A child was insignificant, dispensable part of their culture. They not only didn't have a seat around the table, they weren't even allowed in the room. And Jesus says, unless you welcome them, the lowest, the most dispensable, the most insignificant, the most vulnerable, the most unimportant person, then you have no rank in my kingdom. Whoa. Of course, they, like us, were expecting Jesus to say, look, it's all about your achievements, so send me your resumes. You concerned about rank? Okay, sorry, guys, I haven't dealt with that. I know there's a bit of confusion, so just let me think about it. Send me all your resumes again so I can just check them out. Let's look at your pedigree. Where did you get your degrees? How much experience there? How much money did you bring into this organization? Because this organization is now thousands. It costs a bit of money. So how much money did you bring in? What share do you have? And all these things. How smart are you? How many miracles have you done? How much have you been following me? Did you follow me all the time, every single day, or did you slack off some other days? None of that at all. That's how we operate. That's what we would look for, right? But not Jesus. He says, you know what? It's got nothing to do with your achievements. It's got nothing to do with your position, but it's got everything to do with your posture. It's got everything to do with your predisposition. It's got everything to do whether you love the lowest, whether you love the most dispensable, where you love the most unimportant, the most unattractive. The persons, the group of people that we just want to forget about in society and go over there and let's forget about them. If you're paying attention to those people, you're loving those people, you're a hero. You're a hero. You have rank in my kingdom. Wow. That's a complete contrast to the way the disciples were thinking and the way that we think, especially in America. All right? And so just in case they didn't get it, Jesus goes on in the next chapter, and he dealt with this a lot in his conversations with the disciples. But in chapter 10, verse 42, he makes the contrast to culture. He says, Jesus called them together, the disciples, and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles, those who are concerned about rank, and they get up the ranks, you know what they do? They lord it over them. And their high officials exercise authority over them. He says, you know what? He's insinuating that you actually hate the ranking system. You actually hate it when people get up and they think they're now a little bit better than you, and now they lord it over you, and they have power over you, and they tell you what to do, and they have privilege, and you don't have privilege. You know what? You actually hate that system, don't you? He said, that's not the way it's going to be in the culture of Jesus Christ. This is the way it's going to be. Verse 43, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great, whoever is concerned about ranking among you, must be your servant. Servant. Somebody who has no rank. Somebody who has no place at the table. Somebody who executes the plans of other people. Even the lowest of society. Even the most vulnerable. Even the most dispensable. Even the little child. They are who you are to serve. And whoever wants to be the first, verse 44, must be the slave of all. Not just the cool people, not just the people in our rank, all. Wow. Now I can see that you're all chomping at the bit waiting to get at this. This is just the greatest news I've ever heard, John. I mean, the disciples are just so thrilled about what Jesus said to them. Oh, we can't wait. We're going to get out there. We're going to go for it. Nope. They weren't doing that at all. This was not at the top of their agenda, and it's normally not at the top of our agenda either. You know why? Because of the pressure of culture. Culture is so strong. The pressure of culture is so strong. And we are told right from the beginning, get out there, make a place for yourself, make a name for yourself, get up there, get up in society, stake your claim, get up in rank, because that is what life is all about. And if you don't get up there, you're nothing. You're nothing in this world. You're just an obscure person that nobody worries about. And so we have this warped sense of entitlement as well. Like everybody is there actually to serve us and to help us to get up the ranks, right? The government's there to help us do that. You know, the institutions, the educational institutions, the company, even our parents. The parents are there to help us establish our rank in society and get up and to, live the American dream. We're all about that. And plus, what you're talking about, Jesus, is very, very inconvenient. I mean, how inconvenient can it be? And so it is. It's inconvenient. I mean, even our children are inconvenient to us sometimes, right? We just say, hey, I gotta just set aside my children because I got stuff to do. I got ladders to climb. I got to get there. So this just put the children aside. They're very inconvenient. This is all very inconvenient for life. And there's a huge risk associated with this because we're just going to land up in obscurity. Nobody is going to know our name. We're not going to stake our claim. We're not going to get up there. We're not going to get any of these privileges that come with rank in our society. We're not going to get any accolades either. Nobody's going to be out there applauding and saying, "Oh, well done, little Johnny, you made it." Nobody's going to do that. One of the main reasons we really are clueless about this is because we don't know how to teach it. In fact, you can't teach it. You can only live it. We can teach our children, and we spend thousands of dollars teaching our children how to be great at something. Yep, great at academics, great at maths, great at sports, great at baseball, great at ballet, great at you name it. We're out there. We spend thousands of man hours in the cars driving them to these places so they can be great at something. Because when they're great at something, then they're going to get up in society, they're going to get the ranks and all that sort of stuff, and that's all right. But how about teaching them how to be servants of all? How about teaching them how to be slaves of all? How about teaching them to be looking out for the most dispensable, most unimportant person in society? How about that? And we'll spend thousands of dollars going to applaud the people who have become great at something. And so we teach our kids, that's what life is all about. Just become the greatest football player, the greatest quarterback, the greatest in math, get the greatest degree, get all those things because, we take our children, spend thousands of dollars to do it, right? To get the seats so we can applaud those people who are great at something in the world. And Jesus said we need to become the servants of all because that's how you get rank in the culture of Jesus Christ. And he was the greatest example. We didn't have very many examples, but we had Jesus, and he was the greatest example. And this is what he said about himself. He says, "For even the Son of Man, that's me, the Messiah, did not come to be served." I didn't come to be served. Of all people in the world, I should have been the one who should have been served, right? The Son of God. But I didn't come to be served. I came to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. Well, and Jesus was the greatest servant that ever lived. He was first the servant of God. Okay, the servant is somebody who executes the plans and agenda of other people. And first, our priority as a servant is to become the servant of God, to meet the agenda of God in our lives. And that's what Jesus Christ showed us how to do. He said, "Lo, I come in the volume of the book, it is written of me to do what? To do thy will, O God." He kept telling people in his life, listen, I'm not about my business, I'm about my Father's business. Even before he went to the cross, he said, not my will, but yours be done. And he went to the cross. And that was the agenda of his Father. The agenda of his Father was for Jesus to go to the cross so that he could be a servant of us, who didn't deserve it, who didn't ask for it. We were the lowest of the low. We were all in sin. We had rebelled against God. We didn't even know God, but he sent Jesus to die in our place to pay the ransom price so he could be liberated from the power and the penalty of sin, which is upon us at all time because we were human beings. and will lead us to death and an eternity lost from God. And Jesus came to serve us by giving his life to free us from that. And so when Jesus died, he wasn't dying his own death. He was dying our death. He was paying the ransom price. And the ransom idea comes from the idea of a slave market, as it was in those days, where if you wanted a slave, you would go down to the slave market and they'd all be lined up and you'd choose the one you wanted, but you couldn't just take them. You had to pay a ransom price because they were all owned by people already. So you had to take your money and pay the owner, and that person would not be their servant anymore, but they would become your servant. And so Jesus liberated us from being servants to ourselves, being servants to sin, being servants to the evil one. He liberated us from that by shedding his blood so that we could become the servants of the living God. That's what Jesus did. Without him, we're not here. Without him, we can't sing these songs. And Jesus didn't look across us and say, you've done a lot of great things. You're an achiever. You've made it up the ranks. I'll die for you. I'll pay the ransom price for you. No, he paid the ransom price for everybody. Right from the highest of the high to the lowest of the low. Jesus was the servant of all. And so a true hero in the mind of God is somebody who doesn't seek rank, who doesn't seek a place at the table, but he seeks as the priority of his life to serve other people's agenda, to serve God's agenda first. And God's agenda is that we would serve other people as a priority. So how does this pan out in my life and in your life? How does it translate into everyday life? Because I guarantee we're going to go out there and we're just going to get back into the habits we've always gotten into, which is all about culture and, looking after ourselves and our own needs and me. And we're number one, and we're going to try to get up the ranks. And so how does it apply to us? Well, how does it apply in family life? And I was thinking about this and thinking about my family, and I'm probably the worst example. But, my mother is the most incredible example. I think my mother's a superhero. You've never heard of her. Her name is Elizabeth Forsyth Hastings. She turns 90 this month. But you know what she did her whole life? She never had rank. She never had a position. But she totally served the needs of her family, of her husband, of her children, of the mission that they were sent out to take the gospel to everybody, to those in need in Africa. She served it her whole life. I think she's a hero. Yes. Nobody's heard of her in the world. Obscurity. Nothing. In the kingdom of God, huge. How about in your marriage? Imagine if you phoned your wife, guys, and you said, because guys are more about rank than anyone, right? How about you phoned your wife and said, you know what? I got a Saturday. I've cleared my entire schedule, and it's all about you, and I'm here to meet your needs and your agenda. Everything, every part of it, every day. And every night of the week, I'm going to come home, and it's going to be about your agenda. Not mine. Going to do nothing for myself. I'm here to serve you. Imagine if our families were like that. All the children, mom and dad were all saying, trying to outserve each other. This is not about my agenda. This is not about me being better than my brother or my sister or whatever. I'm here to serve you. Wow. What a different place our families would be, right? How does this translate to business? You say, well, John, it doesn't work in business. Goodness sakes. Have you ever been in business in corporate America? Man, this is dog eat dog. This is get up the ranks. This is man, pedigree. This is like show me your resume. This is like which school did you go to? This is like what have you done? How much sales you got? This is about getting up there. How does it relate to business? Well, I haven't been in business much, and I don't know a lot about it, but I do read leadership books, and one of the best ones I've ever read is Jim Collins' Good to Great, and we actually use it in our leadership development program. Even though it's not a Christian book, it has fantastic leadership principles, because all this man does is he just surveys human behavior in business, and then he writes about it. What does he see? And so he surveyed these companies that went from good companies and they became great companies over a period of time. And he just asked questions. What do they look like and why are they different? Why did they get to that success and other companies just went down in that time? And then he focused a lot on leadership because he found out that a lot of it had to do with leadership and the CEOs who were running the companies. And so he analyzed the CEOs, and he had this little pyramid which shows 5 levels of leadership. And at the bottom is like a level of leadership that everybody kind of gets to, and then the second one less people get to, third people. And then when you get to the top, number 5, the 5th level of leadership, almost nobody gets there, but all of the CEOs of every one of these companies that went from good to great, they showed the 5th level of leadership. And guess what the 5th level of leadership was? Humility. And this is how he described them. He said they were humble, self-effacing, and more concerned about the prosperity of the company than their individual success. They consistently made decisions that were best for the company, even if it meant personal sacrifice. That's somebody you like. That's somebody you can follow, right? He says of them that when good things happened, they looked out the door every single time to see who they could praise. When bad things happened, they looked in the mirror to see who they could blame. All right? That's a servant. I think it works. It works everywhere. And certainly Jesus is looking for it in his church. And so how does the church become great? How does a community group become great? How does a large group of people like us become great? Well, I know there's some great people right here at Mountain Lakes. And Daniel told me about, some people who've come to our church just to give church another try, and they said there's something different here. You know why? Because there's some real true heroes here who are servants, are looking out for other people to love them, and they're not so much about their own agenda. But the other day I went to somebody's house to pray for them. My wife and I did, and the wife had just had an operation and she was incapacitated. And you know what they spent most of the time talking about? They spent most of the time talking about their community group and how much they loved their community group, because even though she was the most vulnerable person in their group at that time and somebody they could just easily have discarded and forgotten about, they didn't. They focused their attention. They set aside the agenda of the group and they said, we're going to focus on this person. And they took them meals and they loved on them. And they even said, we're going to meet at your house. Even though this is the furthest house away, we're going to meet at your house. And they did. You know what? That really built those people up. But that's incredible. That's how heroism, that's how servanthood works its way out in the church. And many of you guys are doing it. And what makes a great church? What makes a great church in the large group sense are servants. People who are not concerned about rank or having a place at the table, but they're just about the other people who are coming to church. That's what makes a great church. And that's why I fell in love with North Point Community Church, our partner church, right at the beginning. So I came over from Cape Town. I heard about this church, and I go in there and I see all these guys in the parking lot, and they're all happy, and they're having a great time, but they're not focused on themselves. They're not talking to each other. They're looking out for the people coming down the road, and here we are coming down the road, and they're looking for us, and they say, come on. They talk to us. Do you have kids? We'll go this way. Adults go this way. Do you have a wheelchair? Go that way. And they were just out to meet our needs. And it was awesome to arrive at church like that, right? These people really care about us. And so afterwards, I was so impressed by this because, in Cape Town, we pay people to do that. They're called car guards, and they're usually refugees from other countries. And so this was like a brand new concept for me. And so I went out to talk to some of these guys, and I said, hey, how are you doing, man? What you did this morning was phenomenal. I love it. I've never seen it before. I said, what do you do? I work for such and such a company. I said, what do you do there? I'm the CEO. Wow. Here's the CEO in the parking lot of North Point Community Church. Doesn't care about rank, doesn't care about place at the table, doesn't care about whether he gets to sit next to Andy Stanley. He's just there. He's just there. Devoid of all that stuff. I'm here to serve people and to serve God's agenda. I love that. And I know there's a bunch of you who are just like that. Way better than me. Daniel talks about the number of people who have come forward to serve in the last month has been incredible. And I just love the one particular lady who came to me with her hands just outstretched like that. Hands outstretched, big heart behind it, and said, John, I'll do anything. If it means holding babies, I'll hold babies. I'll do anything, whatever it takes, to serve the agenda of this church. I love that. That's what's going to make this church great. You know, if there's one story that gets into my heart, and I cry even talking about it, right? I'm going to show you a video this morning of the story that just grabs me. I think, man, this guy is a hero. Because this guy is the servant of all. Watch this.
I love to draw. I came from a family of engineers and designers and builders. My father was an architect, so I really suppose it was in my DNA. When I was in elementary school, I used to sit in back of the class and sketch, make doodles, and sell them to the other kids. It was just an outlet for me. It's a creative outlet. I loved it. I still do. Every single day is completely different. A day on a construction site is actually one of my favorite days because, again, you get to go out and see your handiwork in the third dimension. I think the most satisfying thing about it is it's tangible. So that idea that you had at 2 o'clock in the morning, then to go out and see that a year or two later, be able to touch it and feel it and remember that whole thought that you had. And that's my favorite part, to smell the dirt, smell the concrete, see all the heavy equipment moving around. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have a huge passion for architecture. I love what I do. I look forward to getting up in the morning and going to work. But after attending North Point for a few years, I knew I needed to step up and volunteer in some capacity. And Andy preached one Sunday about needing men to step up and volunteer. And I was thinking, maybe I can go serve in the parking lot, maybe I can run a camera, maybe I can do a lot of kind of masculine type things. But I remember looking at the whole piece of paper that was in the bulletin, and I just felt compelled to sign up for Upstream, more specifically for special needs. I really don't want to be defined by drawing lines on a piece of paper. I really think it's more important to be defined by drawing lines between children's hearts and their Heavenly Father. I walked in the first Sunday and realized I had no skill set to deal with special needs children. But it's interesting when you take that first step and you reach out and you say to God, I can't do this, that He'll reach back and pull your hand and tell you, I can't do this. Look, I'm just like every other guy. I lay in bed at night, I think about bills, am I being a good husband, am I being a good parent? But I found so much grace in that classroom just to walk in and love on those kids. And I find every Sunday I walk out and I just don't have a care in the world. I think being a volunteer is something that you kind of need to do yourself. My wife says that every grown man has a 5-year-old that resides deep inside of them. And it's true. And you get to be a 5-year-old for an hour a week. It's great. All of us must feel some sense of purpose. And for me, it's difficult just to go back to a normal everyday Sunday once you've tasted purpose. I mean, face it, life is difficult. But to come into Upstreet on a Sunday morning and see those kids and their smiles and see all the volunteers, you just can't beat it.
Tom Rhodes, you are a superhero. That's what it's about in the culture of Jesus Christ. Father, you're amazing. We love Jesus for his incredible example to us of being our servant, meeting our deepest needs, even when we didn't ask for it. And you've asked us to be like him. And it's very easy to stand up here and preach about it and come up with an emotional message. It's a different story doing it. So would you just give us the strength, give us the courage to do what we need to do, to extend the arms of love to those with no rank, to those who don't have a place at the table. Help us, Lord, just to meet their needs, their agenda. In the name of Jesus Christ.